Saturday morning cartoons were awesome. From the 1960s through the 1990s, we kicked off each weekend in a frenzy of animation that is unmatched today.
But were these shows actually any good? Join us as we dig into the history of your favorite and not so favorite Saturday morning cartoons, look at the good, the bad, and the ugly of each one, and determine if our nostalgia matches the reality when it comes to these tunes.
So stay in your PJs, grab a bowl of cereal, and settle in. I'm John.
And I'm Robert.
And this is Toon Talk.
So John.
Yeah, Robert.
Can you think of a person or character in pop culture that kind of saw a career, their fate, it kind of fades off, and then they have this renaissance years later that they show up in the spotlight again? Like suddenly, like time goes by and suddenly, like, oh, I remember them. They're great.
Now they're big again.
Yeah.
Yeah, boy. Well, Steve Martin has kind of been that way.
Yeah, he's kind of always been like. The first thing that pops in my head is John Travolta. You think of, like, he was big in the 70s and he disappeared, then suddenly, like,
then all of a sudden he's
Tarantino
in a Quentin Tarantino
huge,
movie, yeah. And he's big again.
Yeah.
Yes.
Tina Turner was another good example of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you see that happen a lot.
Yeah.
Like they have a resurgence once they mature a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, or just something happened like Robert Downey Jr. goes, talk about maturing. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Get sober.
Yeah. But, well, I mean, our featured character for this episode actually fits really nicely in that idea because after debuting in 1966 and then kicking around in syndication for a while, Space Ghost kind of had this career renaissance in the 1920s and the 1990s and the 2000s when he actually was the host of a send-up talk show named after him.
Yeah, Space Ghost Coast to Coast.
Yeah.
Yes, I do remember that.
Yeah, so a guy who's like this cartoon character, I mean, of all things, a cartoon character
right.
gets his resurgence and a new life and a new career. It's kind of funny, but yeah.
Well, the juxtaposition of him being this serious superhero guy on this send-up of a talk show was the whole point.
Yeah, and he's
made it hilarious.
And he's there with his villains.
Right.
Yeah. So outside of how much do you remember the original Space Ghost cartoons from your childhood?
Almost none of it, really. Okay. I mean, I watched some of it. Obviously, it was in syndication, when I watched it. And I just remember the Space Ghost. And I don't remember really. I remember the monkey and some things, but I don't remember much of it at all.
Yeah, I do remember it. I remember watching a lot of it on syndication. I mean, we've talked about this before. The USA Cartoon Express really informed me on a lot of cartoons that I never would have seen otherwise. Right. This being one of them. So I actually did watch a lot of Space Ghost.
Yeah, so we didn't have cable in our household when I was a kid until I was probably in middle school.
Okay.
And that's when, I'm still watching cartoons. Well, I still watch cartoons now. I'm a full-grown adult. But that's when we got all these channels. It was this whole new world of all these cartoons I never saw before. Right. So it was super cool. And that was one of them. Yeah. But I don't remember a lot of it.
Yeah. No, I that was one that I remember. I mean, did you ever watch Space Ghost Coast to Coast?
Oh, yeah.
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 Totally different.
Totally different. Yeah. That was a college thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very, very funny and very distinctly different than what we're talking about today. So we're talking about the original series that aired in 1966.
Right.
So Space Ghost is kind of at the time, was the latest in a growing number of adventure cartoons that Hanna-Barbera was cranking out in the 1960s. Starting in 1964, when they created Johnny Quest, which was a primetime cartoon.
Which we need to add to our list. Johnny Quest is fun.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about in that one, too. Early 1966, Fred Silverman, who we've mentioned before previously, so he was the head of daytime programming at CBS, and he was one of the key cogs in making Scooby-Doo happen for Hanna-Barbera 3 years later. But in 1966, he specifically reached out to Hanna-Barbera because he was looking for a superhero cartoon because he's a fan of comic books, but he also wanted it to have space involved because, space, it's so hot at the time,
Yeah, sure.
It's so hot right now. Everybody, so he's like, we want in on the space thing and we want a superhero. So kind of turned it over to Hanna-Barbera. Hanna-Barbera then recruited a comic book artist named Alex Toth. So Toth, he'd been with the studio, he'd worked with them a little bit. But they kind of leaned on him, and he created a brand new cartoon character, from scratch called Space Ghost.
Yeah.
He also created, which we'll talk about a little bit. Well, not too much because we don't need to. But Dino Boy. Right. So he created this entire show, which is
Space Ghost and
Dino Boy. And his actually, the Toth actually is a bit of a underground, like not even underground, but like a big name in Hanna-Barbera cartoons because his style actually would lead to a handful of other cartoons, which we'll touch on very briefly. And actually, they flow into the end of Space Ghost too. So he actually had his fingerprints are not insignificant in the history of Hanna-Barbera. But so he introduced, to Hanna-Barbera, he included like Birdman and the Mighty Mightor. So it's just like all these different series that would come
new characters
in the next few years.
Yeah.
So he has this original idea, and Space Ghost actually would emerge as Hanna-Barbera's first original superhero.
Really?
Yeah. First time they'd ever done something like
new.
that.
Not from a comic book, just a whole new thing.
And you can see a little bit of... So Toth was a DC Comics artist, and you can see there's definitely a nod to Batman.
The look of
his look, and even kind of the character himself is... It seems like he's just a guy.
Right.
But he's got these power bands instead of a utility belt.
Right.
And that's where all his...
Instead of supernatural powers, he's got toys.
Yeah, he's got the Batman. He's just a dude with a lot of really elaborate gadgets that make him super
hard
to beat. Yeah. So so he's this masked hero who basically travels across the galaxy in his ship called the Phantom Cruiser with 2 teenagers and a monkey.
Well, and why not?
They operate from this planet, this mysterious planet called the Ghost Planet, and they just battle villains. Most of the time, they're all like short little segments. There's nothing really long or elaborate or drawn out on it, but it's a pretty...
They run by pretty quick.
Yeah, and it's pretty formulaic, which is not uncommon for Hanna-Barbera, because, they're cranking out stuff at this point. It's a factory.
Yeah.
Just churning out cartoons, but...
And this happened before the whole slight move away from violence and peril.
Right, this is
the 60s.
Yeah,
almost anything goes.
And this is kind of that last big push between 66, 67, where Hanna-Barbera really leans into that peril and adventure.
Yeah.
And at that point, then it suddenly goes away, just because of the real world encroaching on
See, you'd think I don't listen to what you say, but I've been listening.
I think we brought it up so many times, it doesn't matter. It's only just kind of happens.
It's in there. Yep, it's in there.
I'm trying to avoid it, but you keep talking. Again, in addition to just connecting audiences to space superheroes, they wanted to also lean into that Johnny Quest idea of this young kid who's separated from adults, and he's kind of having adventures. So that's where the Dino Boy component of this. So Dino Boy is this kid who parachutes out of a burning plane. I don't know if he was flying or what he was doing.
Where he came from, yeah.
But he ends up on this prehistoric island or land or planet. I don't know. Flintstones world. I don't know. And he is...
the Jetsons prison planet again.
Exactly. Shot down by one of the spacey
rockets. Yeah.
So he goes into this place called the Lost Valley, and he's rescued by a caveman by the name of Ugg. Mm-hmm. And they have a brontosaurus, a small brontosaurus sidekick, and eventually there's also a woolly mammoth that shows up as a plot convenience.
Right.
Every once in a while they really need it.
They need a mammoth, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and it's just, they have, I guess, adventures, but, it's basically a Space Ghost segment, followed by Dino Boy, followed by Space Ghost.
Yeah.
And that's a half hour. So just these quick little cartoons. And but I mean, the idea for that when Toth created it, the idea is like kind of lean into those Flash Gordon serials of like the 1940s and 50s. And kind of that's the stuff that influenced George Lucas, even just like these kind of, short little adventures that are just like, oh, well, that's kind of neat, and then different creatures or different foils to kind of go against, and then you end and move on to the next episode. So nothing in, especially with Dino Boy, there's nothing leads from one cartoon to the next.
No continuity from one to the other. Yeah,
it is just all standalone.
Right.
And again, not uncommon for Hanna-Barbera at that point. So easily, when you get into syndication, you can just pick up an episode and you know what's happening.
Pop it in, yeah.
Yeah, the introduction for both cartoons, or at least for Dino Boy, gives you the backstory.
Yep.
And it just plops you right in the Lost Valley, and there you go.
Let's go. Yeah. Who's going to chase him this time?
Exactly.
Or what is going to chase him?
Yeah, who gets captured, who needs to rescue who.
Right.
So Space Ghost with Dino Boy in tow would debut on CBS on September 10th, 1966. The series would sandwich, as I said, like the one segment of Dino Boy between the other two. And then over that half hour, they would just, basically each segment would be very similar. So for Space Ghost, you'd see typically Jan or Jace, or both, the two teenagers would be captured. And then Space Ghost would have to come. He'd be called as like, oh, I've got your teenagers. I'm going to, you got to do what I say, otherwise they'll be hurt. So Space Ghost comes, and they rescue him, basically with the help of Blip. And then everybody's good, and they move on to the next episode. And every once in a while, Space Ghost gets captured, and the teenagers and Blip have to help them. But ultimately, it's Blip who's the one who kind of saves most of them.
Right, yeah, the monkey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At the same time, you get into Dino Boy, and most of the time, it's Dino Boy gets captured, and then Ugg has to come and rescue him.
Yeah. And Ugg's not that bright.
No.
But he's jungle smart.
He's jungle smart.
Not street smart, jungle smart.
Yeah, he can't count to 5, but
Yeah,
you can't get one over on him.
no.
But yeah, every once in a while.
If I'm in a fight in the jungle, I want him with me.
yeah, he's good in a fight.
Yep.
It's kind of the same thing. It's Dino Boy, but sometimes it's Ugg who gets captured or gets caught doing something, and then
peril ensues, and there's a rescue.
Everybody else has to rescue them.
Yep.
I mean, and it's kind of
pretty formulaic.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much the same thing. Space Ghost actually would only run for one season, or 20 episodes, and ultimately it was canceled because CBS wanted to throw more money at a different Alex Toth series in the Herculoids.
Yeah, so the Herculoids was big.
Yeah, and
several seasons.
They saw more potential in Herculoids, so they decided, we don't need to spend the money on this. Let's spend the money on Herculoids. So thanks, Space Ghost. Space Ghost actually did quite well in terms of ratings for a Saturday morning cartoon. It was actually fairly popular.
Yeah.
But they just thought they had a bigger hit looming with
maybe there were better merchandising opportunities or something.
Or more character. Ultimately, there's more characters with Space Ghost.
There's 4.
Yeah, and Herculoids had, 6 total, I think, in it? We haven't even gotten to that one yet.
Yeah, we haven't done that one yet.
But they've got a dragon, so... Yeah.
Sure, yeah. Throw a dragon in there.
So, like many of the Hanna-Barbera shows, Space Ghost really thrived in syndication. So that show, particularly Space Ghost, not so much Dino Boy, which is understandable, but... Which
I don't remember Dino Boy at all until I started watching for this. I'm like, oh, this Dino Boy thing's in the middle here, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, but Dino Boy never really survived past the 60s.
No, and it sounds like made up. Like, did you ever watch Dino Boy? I'm like, what are you talking about, Dino Boy? Space Ghost is cool, but
is that one of those
Dino
weird,
Boy.
like, H.R. Puffin stuff?
Sid
and Marty Krofft weird things?
Yeah.
Dino Boy. That one never really moved on, but Space Ghost, understandably, I mean, it was a cool-looking superhero.
Sure.
Had space adventures.
Had a spaceship.
Yeah, I mean, he was kind of, throughout the 70s, living on in syndication. In 1981, he actually returns with new segments as part of this animation block that Hanna-Barbera put together called Space Stars. So they had 22 new episodes of Space Ghost, and they actually redesigned the Phantom Cruiser and kind of updated a couple looks and things like that. Then it was also, they actually created new episodes of the Herculoids. They created two new segments called Teen Force and then Astro and the Space Mutts. And it's Astro from the Jetsons.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, and so that actually ran for a season in 1981. It was just kind of a new thing, and then it went away again. But again, syndication, of course, like the USA Network, things like those. All those new ones kind of moved on. So now you had 42 episodes or 43 episodes of Space Ghost kind of out there in the ether in syndication. Right. So it kind of continued to move on until, as we mentioned, 1944. So that he gets completely redone as part of the send-up of late night talk shows. Yeah. As part of the Space Ghost Coast to Coast. Right. He's got Zorak and Moltar and Brack.
And Brack.
Yeah. it's kind of sidekicks. It's kind of talking and like it's pretty funny.
Well, the juxtaposition of this super serious, deep voice superhero, making people laugh. It was, just the fact that it was him made it funny.
Yeah, and just it's a show that leaned into like empty pauses too, where you could just be silent and you just see him like tapping like the note card on the desk, or everybody just like you cut somebody else and they're just blinking, and then they cut somebody else. It's just very funny and very, very sharp send up.
Yeah.
That actually lasted for 10 years, 8 years on Cartoon Network. And then it moved over to this gaming service called Game Tap for 2 years before it finally disappeared. I have no idea what Game Tap was. I didn't even realize it was on that long.
I didn't either.
I figured it was like maybe 1 or 2 years and it went away. But yeah, I didn't watch it regularly. But yeah. So that's kind of, and that's where, like, if you look up Space Ghost, you find more references to Space Ghost Coast to Coast than you do the original cartoons. But and it's not a big cast. Again, it's 4 characters plus all the villains, but with this original series, it had some definite heavy hitters.
Yeah,
in terms of voices.
It's an interesting cast because not all of these people were really voice actors outside of this, with a few exceptions, obviously, but. What's interesting about them is what else they did in addition to Space Ghost. Space Ghost was also the narrator, played by Gary Owens, began as a radio personality. He played Blue Falcon on Dino Mutt. God Wonder, he was announcer on Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In, which is super cool.
That's where he became really famous.
Yeah.
Actually. People began to know because they would show him on camera every once in a while.
Yeah, so it's rare that you'd see a voice actor on camera, you know. He did a couple of non-Muppet credits on Sesame Street, like background voices on Sesame Street. He did the opening theme for Garfield and Friends and the commercial for Super Mario Land 2. That was his voice. And he's a narrator on the pilot episode of Sonic the Hedgehog. But, you know, the Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In thing was just awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, it was super cool to find that. Jan, played by Ginny Taylor. She played Sue Richards, the Invisible Girl, in the 1978 Fantastic Four. Many additional voices for the Hanna-Barbera cartoons, like they'd find her in the hallway, here, come read this type of thing. Princess Anne on Gumby Adventures. Many credits as small animals, like the lamb in Mary Poppins, a parrot on Mr. Ed, and she was a squirrel on Sword in the Stone, because she had that little tiny voice that she could do to do these small animals. Her brother, Jace, in the show, voiced by Tim Matheson, did do some Scooby-Doo Mystery Inc. Did 13 episodes of that. On television, lots of television credits. Dr. Brick Breland on Heart of Dixie did 70 episodes of that show. Dr. Vernon Mullins on Virgin River, and played Vice President John Hoynes on 20 episodes of The West Wing. So I know who that is.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, wow, when he grew up, he became vice president.
He grew up to become vice president.
Yeah, how about that?
Living the dream.
All the way from Space Force to the White House. And then...
they didn't look too closely into his history on Ghost Planet. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
His records are hard to find.
Yes, they've been hidden away. All the genocide that took place. So Todd was played by John David Carson. He also played Dino Boy. In Dino Boy, and had a part in the movie Pretty Woman. He was Mark, one of the investors, was on Falcon Crest. A lot of episodes in the late 70s, 80s television hits like Chips, Taxi, Hawaii Five-0, The Fall Guy, and did 2 episodes of Charlie Angels. And he did a feature film, and after his feature film debut, he was sued by Johnny Carson for using the name John Carson. So he went by John David Carson, which is why he uses his middle name, because the funny man John Carson said, you can't use my name even though it's your name too. And apparently John Carson had better lawyers than John David Carson, and here we are.
You're not funny enough to use my name.
Apparently, yeah. Ugg was played by Mike Road. He was Lee Chin on Captain Caveman and the Teen Angels. Reed Richards in Mr. Fantastic with Ginny Taylor. John Butler on Valley of the Dinosaurs, and Race Bannon on Johnny Quest. So there's actual Johnny Quest connection here in this cartoon. And additional voices on the Godzilla TV series and new Scooby-Doo. Brack, played by Kay Luke, K-E-Y-E, Luke. I'm guessing it's spelled K or Key. Was born in China, grew up in Seattle, and was a commercial artist and a designer of movie posters. He was hired as technical advisor on Asian films, made his film debut on The Painted Veil, and it seemed like that anytime a film called for a Chinese character, he was their guy. He, in the 1970s, was made aware of his talents by a reoccurring role on Kung Fu, the 1970s series Kung Fu, And he was the original Kato in Green Hornet. In the Green Hornet series, he played Kato.
Wow.
And he was the grandfather in Gremlins. And Mr. Wing. Yeah, he was the grandfather in Gremlins and Gremlins 2 as Mr. Wing. And I skipped over one of our heroes who played Astro, Scooby-Doo, Droopy, Dr. Benton Quest, Bam Bam Rubble, Boo Boo, Ranger Smith, Papa Smurf, Scavenger, Gears and Ratchet on the Transformers. Of course, if you need somebody to do an animal voice, you go get Don Messick as Blip. Yeah. So Don Messick played Blip the monkey, which was our hero in the show.
Yeah.
And then Metalis and Moltor, played by the same person, Ted Cassidy. And I kept Ted Cassidy for the last because he's one of my favorite voices. He was only in 2 episodes, but I wanted to mention him. He was a narrator on the TV series The Incredible Hulk and the uncredited voice of the Hulk. Additional voices on Captain Caveman, Tarzan, Lord of the Jungle. He was Ben Grimm on The Thing, The Fantastic Four. So we had Ben Grimm, we had the Invisible Woman, and we had Mr. Fantastic all in the same cast here that went on to do the Final Four.
Just disappointed that there's no Human Torch or no Herbie the Robot.
That's all we're missing, right? But the reason he's one of my favorites is his live actions include the famous episode of The $6 Million Man where he played Bigfoot. Remember the big $6 Million Man episode where he fights Bigfoot? Yeah. Ted Cassidy played Bigfoot. But even better, he was Lurch on the Addams Family. Nice. You rang, which is one of my favorite things to say. So he had a super cool career after this little cartoon thing he did, But yeah, playing Bigfoot on the $6 Million Man, I mean, it's just iconic. You find a picture of that everywhere. You're like, really? People bought this?
Well, it makes sense that Lurch would be able to play the role of Bigfoot.
Because he's huge. He's a big dude. Yeah, so not a super accomplished voice actor cast outside of, Messick, but a lot of them did real, acting. Yeah. I don't want to call it real acting, but beyond voice acting, actually on screen acting. After this.
Yeah, had long, fairly significant
careers. Outside of voice acting.
Whether it's voice acting or otherwise.
Yeah.
I am going to throw out one more name that you didn't mention because he only showed up in one segment of a Space Ghost episode, and that's Paul Frees, who we've seen him before in a couple of the episodes. Yeah. I know him pretty well because he's the voice of the ghost host from the Haunted Mansion at Disney World, but he's done so many different voices.
Foolish mortals.
In this one, so... I don't know the irony of this. He plays a character named Zeron, but it's the name of the episode. It's Paul Frees, and he's the villain in the episode, the Iceman.
Oh, that's hilarious. I remember the Iceman episode. Sure, yeah.
Yeah, it's actually one of the better ones,
too.
Is. It's actually kind of silly. It's just he uses this giant ice ray to freeze the ghost planet to kill...
Right.
Yeah, to kill the Space Ghost, and so then they come back and just like, well, we're going to break your laser.
Yeah. Oh, darn. Foiled again.
But it's a good cast, and actually Gary Owens has got a really, for his first time doing a superhero or really doing a voice acting role.
He's
just
perfect.
It's just
it was that classic superhero voice,
And then they use him as the narrator too, because we'll talk about the last episodes, a little bit later, but. They actually do give like a little bit of like summary and narration to like a handful of the episodes, and he is actually the narrator too. So but I mean, he does a really good job, and of course, then he does the Space Ghost. It's just such a great intro,
just iconic.
Yeah. So, what did you think of Space Ghost?
I watched some of it when I was a kid, and I didn't really remember it. When I watched it this time. It was hard to tell sometimes if they were the good guys because it seemed like they just come across these other creatures like, well, that needs to be stopped. These people are protecting their own home or whatever, and they get in a tiff with these people. But what I loved about it and truly loved about it was true to like the 60s sci-fi thing. It was the sharp angles on the ship and the lasers and the sounds and these weird worlds. That I really enjoyed. I really liked that part of it. the animation was super cool.
Yeah.
Because it reminded me of those old cereals, and the old press tinned lunch boxes and stuff. That whole world was really cool and kept me intrigued. Like I always wanted to see, well, who's the next villain or alien they're going to run into, you know. So that I really enjoyed.
Yeah, I like it starts with that design of Space Ghost. It's such a cool looking character. That draws you in right off the bat, which kind of helps sell it.
Right. And he's wearing mostly white, like the good guys wear white, But
then he's got the bright yellow cape and then the black hood.
Yeah.
It's really cool. And then he's got that really cool, just like this ghost symbol, kind of where he ties the cape onto him. It's just it's really neat. I love the look of it. And it's kind of like a very clean look, which kind of helps sells it. But I like the diversity in terms of the bad guys. Anytime you get a superhero, like they kind of make or break them by their villains.
Yes,
and he's got some really good villain. Brack is a better foil in Space Ghost Coast to Coast than he is in the cartoons. He's got like him and his brother Cisco, or I can't remember what his brother's name is, but it's interesting because I like what they do where they really. You step into it like they don't give you the history of like Zorak or all these bad guys. No. They're just like you just go and they hate Space Ghost because there's a built-in history.
There's some kind of background there.
Yeah, like you just know that it's bad.
Yes,
and they want revenge.
Yeah, they've got a history and no one knows it.
Yeah, and so again, it's the for the most part, so a lot of these villains are good. The one thing I get disappointed in as I watched it and realizing that there's no point where with the superhero, you want a superhero to come in and save people. They want to save the day, not just saving his teenage sidekicks who keep getting themselves in trouble.
Yeah.
Like you want him to come like, Moltar's trying to take over this planet. Here comes Space Ghost to save the population of the planet and get. There was really none of that. You had more of that in Dino Boy.
Yeah.
Than you did in this one like twice.
Right. So more or less than that.
Yeah. But it was that was kind of the one thing I was just like I didn't remember. I remember watching and liking Space Ghost, but I never really registered that. But when you're sitting there watching them back to back, you realize like the formula and like at some point you just want him to save somebody.
Yeah. Quit saving your own skin because you're putting yourself in trouble.
Because so much of it comes down to either saving, It's a lot of the bad guys. Like what's neat about it is like this built-in history, but it's also leans way too much into it. And like, well, they just want revenge on Space Ghost, so they just go and capture him or the tweak teens. And I was like, okay, yeah.
But what happened to make them hate Space Ghost?
Yeah,
is he flying around? Space Ghost would fly around and insert himself into situations, and maybe that's what they hated. Like, just let the evil happen. It's not bothering you. This has nothing to do with you, man. Just
go back to your ghost planet.
Go back to just why are you out here?
Yeah, we're good here.
But his powers, with the power bands, so he didn't have the inert superpowers like a Superman or the Spider-Man or whatever. No scientific thing going on with him, but it was his tools, like you mentioned, the Batman stuff, and they had the power bands, but sometimes like they could fly without their jetpacks, and sometimes he would say, go put your jetpacks on, kids, we're going down there, and sometimes they would just fly without them. And the invisibility was kind of cool, which is like, oh, that's why it's called Space Ghost, because he's invisible. But I had heard one time the kids talking to each other about their homework. Like, they're still going to school? Like, what is this? Like, after we kill this lava monster, I got to study.
Physics is kicking my butt, Space Ghost.
Yeah. You think, we own a spaceship. We should be able to figure this out. So there was no backstory to, like, who are these kids and why are they hanging out with Space Ghost and where'd they get the monkey? Is the monkey just there for comic relief? And
ultimately, Blip tends to be the smartest in terms of using all these compared to the teenagers anyway. Like like he knows when to go invisible. He knows when to like. They're like, oh, good idea, Blip, and like, well, it's too late for you two.
Right. Yeah.
But so he saves the day so much of the time. But there's one point where because. A lot of the time you see Jan and Jace doing their thing and then Space Ghost is nowhere around.
Right.
and I can't remember which episode it was, but at one point Space Ghost is like, you guys need to go over there. I'm going to go. I need to go here. And Jace is like, well, no, we're going to stay with you. We go wherever you go, Space Ghost.
Yeah.
And, not really. And
no,
it's the case of like Space Ghost. Like,
proved. Yeah, they're feral children. It's kind of
like more Space Ghost looking like, hey, so Jace, when Space Ghost goes in the bathroom, that's his time,
yeah.
not our time.
And Blip was like a space monkey, right? Because he was purple.
No, he's
purple
brown.
or blue? Is he brown?
He's brown. No, he's just got the same outfit.
He's got the uniform on.
Yeah, they all have the same uniform.
That's right. Yeah,
and he's got a mask because they don't want that monkey identity getting out there.
Can't identify the monkey in the monkey lineup. I don't know. The monkey was wearing a mask.
There's two teenagers. I think they're teenagers, but they're wearing masks. And the monkey, I don't know. I couldn't tell you.
Right. Yeah. It had a tail and
a domino mask, and that's where I couldn't. I was stumped at that point.
I don't know. It must be dozens of kids running around here with a monkey in a uniform.
No, you mentioned the very first episode, because you mentioned this earlier, that it's called the
lava monster.
Yeah, it's
right?
like the heat thing or whatever it is what they call it.
He's on a volcano planet of some kind.
And it's Jace just flying by himself over this planet, and this
decides to land in
this lava monster kind of emerges and like sees this ship, looming over his home, and so he tries to
knock it out of the sky.
Yeah, he flings some lava at it.
Yeah,
and suddenly it becomes as they rage this war on this lava monster. Like, he didn't do anything.
Right, he's just protecting his home. You colonist.
He came out of his hole in the ground.
Wasn't bothering anybody.
Help! I'm being repressed.
Yes.
But it's. And it's Space Ghost comes down and he's got his pile driver ray.
Pile driver ray, yeah.
And he just shoots it, and you can kind of see like the ray is like the
pulsates.
Steady beam,
yeah.
But like he moves his hands back and forth as if that's doing something. Like he's piled, like he's got like jackhammer.
He's got to jackhammer this lava monster,
and then he just hammers this creature back into his hole, and then they cover it up. Like, what? Poor guy.
He wasn't doing anything.
Come out for some fresh
Minding
air.
Minding his own business.
But, yeah.
Out to tend to his rock garden. And his kids destroyed it.
Yeah, a little moment of zen and suddenly getting pounded.
Out there with his lava rake, minding his own business. You know what I found interesting was that they straight up murdered and killed villains in this. Like the ant creatures. I can't remember which episode it was. They looked like ants with antennae, and they would just ray them, and they'd just disappear.
Yeah, that was fairly early on, too.
Yeah, it was like one of the very first episodes, and they had these, I don't know, they were crossed between like anthropomorphic termites and ants.
Yeah.
And they were protecting their home, protecting their queen, and Space Ghost and the kids would use this laser beam and just disintegrate these things. Like, straight up killing these things. Which is unusual. I mean, even Batman doesn't kill people.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, well, and it was just... Even you get later episodes, too. There's one point where they... Basically, Moltar's ship gets destroyed by his own robot, by his own, whatever, robot ships, and they're like, well, that takes care of him. Yeah. Of course, Space Ghost has Moltar always seems to survive.
Yes. I've tried to kill him before.
So in case you parents are upset, nobody, we can't prove that he's dead. So, yeah.
No body.
There was also the episode, the Cyclopeds, which is this guy. He's got. I just thought it was funny. So it's this little creature, this little green guy. Right. He's got a little hat on his head that has a single eye on the front, and he's got all these robots that match. Like he called them the Cyclopeds, so like Cyclopean.
Mm-hmm.
But the creature who controlled them all had two eyes. It's like he was a Cyclops.
Yeah.
He just made all these he called them all Cyclopeds, and he wore a hat
that had one
matched, eye. Had that looked the same way, but it was just a hat.
Yeah.
He's just really into Greek myth.
Yeah.
I'm big
all in.
I'm all in on Cyclops right now.
At least he could have wore a patch over one eye, How'd you get that nickname? I bought this hat and people started calling me Cyclops.
Or they tell you don't run with scissors.
Yes.
I'm trying to think what other episodes really jumped out at me.
they moved really quick.
They did.
Which was cool.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of fill-in or, they didn't spend a lot of time flying through space. It was like things happened quickly, which was cool. It kept you engaged.
Yeah, it's brief storytelling.
Yes.
It works really well. Actually, kind of the opposite, though, like the ant creatures where they just straight up kill them,
right.
murder them. There's the episode, the Gargoyles, which is these weird, like, bat-like creatures that they stumble across.
They were kind of scary looking.
They were actually like kind of the creepiest,
frightening,
the creepiest ones they come across. And it's like they're wandering through like the cosmos, or whatever. They end up on this planet, and these Gargoyles are like they're more primitive. They actually worship a god of some sort,
right?
And they actually go out of their way to protect the Gargoyles and not hurt them. They basically just destroy their idol.
Yes,
they wipe out their god.
Yeah,
and then just like, well, now they're okay.
It goes back to my theory of colonization. We're coming in. You're gonna pray to our god. You're gonna do our things. We're gonna eliminate your culture and take your land.
They didn't show them making this mud and clay model of Space Ghost, but I assume they did.
Probably did after that. Yeah. Like in one of the recent Star Trek movies where they're not supposed to be seen, but the Enterprise gets seen and the natives immediately draw a shape of the Star Trek Enterprise on the dirt. Yeah. I'm sure that's what happened. They started worshiping Space Ghost after that.
Yeah.
Waiting for him to return.
Just patiently waiting.
Yeah, it has been written.
So the series ends... And we haven't talked about Dino Boy. We can talk about Dino Boy in a little bit, but, whatever.
Yeah.
But the last 2 episodes are all Space Ghost. It's 3 segments each of Space Ghost. Mm-hmm. And they all actually interlock. So they all connect story-wise.
Which none of the rest of them do.
Nope. And the episode 19 starts with the segment called The Meeting, which is you have Metalis, so like the big heavy hitters from Space Ghost's Rogues Gallery. Metalis, the Creature King, Zorak, Moltar, Brack, not his brother, just Brack. And then the Black Widow / the Spider Woman, because they give her 2 different names throughout the series.
That was weird.
She shows up twice in 2 other episodes. The first time she's the Black Widow, the next time like the Return of the Spider Woman.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
It's just...
They're like, I forgot this chick's name. What is she? I know the spider chick. I don't know. Spider Woman? I think that's
the Web Lady. Yeah.
Web Lady, yeah.
Spider Woman, whatever. So they unite and form the Council of Doom.
Yes.
And they kind of combine their misery and make their plan to destroy Space Ghost.
You're right.
And then, as you would if you're going to combine your plans, you just send out, okay, but tell us, you go do it. Right. And they go one by one over between that episode, like that segment. It's like the next 6 segments.
One at a time.
They take turns failing at starting Space Ghost, which is what they've been doing before. Instead of combining their strength or their might or intelligence, it's all just like
come at them from every corner of the room.
Now it's my turn.
Oh, one at a time.
Now it's Creature King's time to shine. And then lose. So it's interesting. It's actually like...
Yeah.
Because... Again,
kind of a cool way to wrap it up.
Yeah, and you add that continuity, it actually... there's a little bit more... a little more stake involved, especially when it's, it's basically Space Ghost running the gauntlet against his biggest enemies. They just one by one.
Right, one at a time.
Yeah. But it's, so 6 segments, but it's actually... It ends on a really high note. It's a really good way to wrap up that series.
Right. It classic showmanship. It leaves you wanting more. So like I wanted that continuity and the struggle between him and these villains to continue more than the 12 minutes that you got to see it.
Right.
I wanted to see that history and what is this, angst and what's this pageantry for? Why do they hate him so much? I wanted to see that. Yeah.
But, I mean, you realize how effective the Legion of Doom was in Super Friends.
Yeah.
When they actually were able to...
work together.
They ultimately would lose, but, when they're actually working together, when it wasn't Toyman or Riddler...
They made it difficult. Right.
Jerking their plans around. Everything would actually... they would actually...
would
be
work.
On the verge of winning.
I mean, even Gargamel would use his cat appropriately sometimes. You know what I mean?
Gargamel, the ultimate team player.
Yes.
I mean, we can talk a little bit about Dino Boy. What were your thoughts about Dino Boy?
Honestly, I didn't pay a lot of attention to Dino Boy.
That's about the right approach to Dino Boy.
Yeah. So Space Ghost I'd be watching it, and Dino Boy would come on. I'd go get something to drink, or I'd check my phone or whatever, and I'd kind of pay attention to it. And like, oh, look at that. And then, it reminded me of Land of the Lost.
Exactly. That's on the nose.
But wasn't as good.
Yeah.
It wasn't good enough to remind me of Land of the Lost. I'm like, why does this make me feel like Land of the Lost? Because it's not. But that type of peril and that world, it reminded me of that. And I loved Land of the Lost, so I wanted to like it, but I really didn't.
Yeah, I mean, it's just forgettable.
Right.
Unfortunately. I mean, there's some of the animation, it's fine. It's confusing. Ultimately, it's what is this Lost Valley? What is this place?
Yeah, and is he trying to get back to where he's from,
and why are there so many just very distinct different creatures? And it's not just they're individual creatures. It's just colonies of these different
societies
of ant people or whatever they are. Because they're all distinctly different. How big is this valley?
Right. How are all these communities living coexisting?
Is this a block at a time?
Yeah.
It's just how big is this? And and there's more questions. Where how is this kid on a plane? What happened to everybody else in the plane?
Right.
Did they kick him out because he was annoying? Katie Aspen Twickers.
Yeah.
Get out of here. I mean, it's...
I didn't pay first class to listen to your kid whine the whole time. Get.
Tell it walking, kid.
Yeah. Or he was a stowaway, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
Pound sand, kid.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But, it's just forgettable. It's fine.
Yeah.
I mean...
I didn't hate it.
No.
But
it is, I mean... unnecessary for this show. They could have done more Space Ghost, and I think it would have been Actually, would have been just fine.
Do 2 15-minute segments instead of a 12, and a 12.
Yeah, or even if they did three segments like they did the last 2 episodes, it would have been fine.
Yeah.
They could have done two tied-in episodes and then a standalone, or however they could have found different ways to make that work. But,
Or with the foil, to do the first, episode is the creation of the conflict. The second episode is the battle. And the third episode is the resolution. That would be a cool formula, really. But
it would have worked. They chose not to do that, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And here we are. But,
right.
Any other, last thoughts on Space Ghost?
Not really. I mean... Did I like watching them? It's watchable. I'll say that. It's watchable. Will I watch them again? Probably not.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the characters. The villains, I thought at points were funny. And I loved the sci-fi, it was true to the 60s sci-fi stuff, which was cool. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah. So what's the good? What's your good takeaways on this?
The good takeaway is that Space Ghost had the very masculine, deep voice and the square jaw and the big shoulders, and he was a superhero, which was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I loved his look. I mentioned it before. I loved his look. I liked, you get a couple of those. I like the idea of this established history that you're kind of being thrown into. I like that idea. You don't need to know every single why Zorak and why Brack and all these people hate him so much. It would be nice to get a little bit once in a while,
right?
And again, but overall, I like that they trust their audience enough to just hey kid,
jump in.
This is a bad guy.
Here's a good guy and here's a bad guy.
He's a bad guy who hates Space Ghost.
Right.
And it kind of, you don't have to spend too much time on that exposition and setting it up. It's here's the conflict and just get right into it.
Yeah.
So, and again, that kind of leads to that kind of that
makes it go quicker.
Storytelling that makes it entertaining.
Yeah, the serial storytelling type thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, and the bad and ugly. I mean, the bad was I wish I'd known more. Had more opportunity to know these villains.
Yep.
And And the ugly was just the straight up like getting into the business of something they didn't need to be in, like the lava monster, just minding his own business. And you landed on his planet, and now you're like, well, we need to deal with him. So I didn't care for that as much. Maybe I'm an adult and I'm freaking out about it. You know, I shouldn't. You know, looking at it through a child's eyes, it's like, oh, he's a scary monster.
Yeah, it's just a monster, and
he's trying to hurt us.
I understand in a way. It's like this is your introduction to the Space Ghost, and it's like here's this big lava. I mean. Is a scary looking monster, and they're just going to beat him down and move on. And so I get it, but
I didn't understand why these two kids were hanging out with him. Like, is he their uncle or is he their guardian? I didn't get it. And then when they were talking about doing homework, I'm like, what? Where did these kids go home at night? I mean, what is going on?
What kind of society is this ghost planet got? What do they get going on?
Yes, exactly.
They like work study?
These are my interns. Superhero interns.
We got to go fly a couple galaxies over and take care of a couple things.
There you go. Yeah, we'll be back.
We'll be back. They'll be back for the 3 o'clock test.
Yeah.
No worries about it.
Well, I got to get them home. Time to get on the bus. Go back home.
Yeah, and bad for me, it's... Part of it is just like, for a superhero story, he doesn't really save anybody.
Yeah, he just saves himself.
He saves his team.
Yeah, there's no damsel in distress other than his own team.
Yeah, I mean, there's like the best Batman episodes where he's saving people who can't help themselves.
Yes,
it's like he's saving the innocents,
guardian of the innocent.
Yeah, Space Ghost doesn't at any point do that.
Yeah,
it's just it's too much just straight up. We hate you and we want to stop you, and so now that's our conflict.
Right. So if he had landed on a planet where there were people being oppressed, and he had to deal with that makes it more interesting.
Yeah.
Other than there's just a bad guy there minding his own business, and I'm going to deal with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing. It's just
that's kind of a miss.
That true superhero component of it was kind of not really. He does heroic things, but it's just in service to himself or his team and not to the greater good.
Right. Yeah, I see that. Yeah.
But I didn't really have any ugly... I was kind of back and forth on the voice of Brack and his brother Cisco because they're
Chinese.
That Chinese. But at the same
time...
There
weren't any real cultural tropes.
No, there was no trope at all.
Voice,
and it was just kind of those voice. And it was just, they were consistent between just those two characters. And it was, And they're aliens, so you've got to come up with different kind of ways to do it.
Different culture,
Ultimately, it was fine.
Yeah,
so
I agree.
Yeah.
So overall,
overall score, I kind of had to break it down 2 different ways. So one, how was Space Ghost, how was Dino Boy, and then find a way to kind of marry those scores. So Dino Boy was, again, it's forgettable. It's not bad. It's just, ultimately one of the worst sins, I think we mentioned it before, is just like creating a cartoon. It's just like you don't even remember it.
Right.
That's what Dino Boy was. So Dino Boy is a pretty, I gave it a 3. Mm-hmm. Space Ghost is better, significantly better. But, kind of those flaws that we talked about earlier, I kind of put it at between a 5.5 and a 6.
Okay.
So I think my final score would probably be about, I think Space Ghost, because it's, more prominent. I probably put it about a 4.5 total for both combined.
Yeah. And I was at, I loved the 60s sci-fi stuff about it. I loved the animation. I thought the actors were good. But it's kind of a thing that it's like a really cool looking sedan. It's like, oh, that's a useful car. It's good looking. Well, do I ever care to ride in that car again? No.
Yeah.
So I gave it a 5. I'm like, just kind of the middle of the road.
Yeah.
I don't want to blast the whole thing, but I'm not going to tell people it's the greatest thing I've ever seen. So I just landed right in the middle at 5.
It does make me curious at some point down the road we go back and watch Space Stars when they introduce all the new segments.
Yeah.
And see what
if it changes our mind.
Yeah, and they may do some of the things that we felt were lacking here may actually show up in those episodes.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, down the road. We've got other things. We've got something else to do first.
Yeah. There's a big blockbuster movie coming out this summer. the new Superman movie, and I'm a huge fan of Superman, or I'm a super fan of Superman, I should say.
Nice.
And my little sister is a fanatic about Superman. She'll consume anything Superman. So I think we need to go back and look at Superman the animated series.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah, and any excuse for me to go back and watch that cartoon, I'm in.
All right, let's do it.
All right.
Well, I hear, Mom, I think it's time for us to go outside. So that means cartoon time is over. I'm John.
I'm Robert.
And this is Toon Talk.
Hey, thanks for listening. If you want more Toon Talk, you can find us on Twitter at Toon Talk Guys.
Or if you've got questions, comments, or suggestions, you can email us at toontalkguys@gmail.com.